To Live on Lafayette Square, Society and Politics in the President's Neighborhood, by William Seale, narrated by William Seale III, the author's son, published by the White House Historical Association. My father has dedicated this book to his wife and my mother, Lucinda. Lafayette Square was society beyond the square the country began. Henry Adams, 1868. The wreckers haven't started yet, and until they do, the square can be saved. Jacqueline Kennedy, 1962. Prologue. Pennsylvania Avenue divides Lafayette Square from the White House. The iconic President's House complex and the square are in fact one property, as laid out 2 centuries ago by Pierre-Charles L'Enfant, the Frenchman who planned the capital city and envisioned its orderly development by subdividing it into squares. President George Washington, a surveyor himself, cited the President's House, a smaller version of the great building L'Enfant had in mind. One element of the scheme that was not built was a ceremonial approach to the President's House made from the north by extending 3 broad avenues, today Connecticut Avenue, 16th Street, and Vermont Avenue, and uniting them in a semicircular forecourt. This was intended to serve a more palatial establishment than the White House we know. The abandonment of L'Enfant's palace, and thus the triple avenues that served it, freed the ground to make way for Lafayette Square. The site was left open and untended. During Thomas Jefferson's presidency, simply for convenience, Pennsylvania Avenue was snaked around in front of the White House, which split the 7-acre square away from the balance of some 80 acres, the President's Park, that was reserved for the President's residence. President James Monroe named it Lafayette Square, honoring the visiting Marquis de Lafayette, the hero of 2 worlds, who toured the United States in 1824 and 25. Like other ceremonial features of the L'Enfant plan, the National Mall, for example, the 3 avenues might well have been extended and thus left no space for a public square. What stopped them was neither money nor taste, but the pesky intervention of an entrepreneur named Samuel Davidson, who went to court and insisted that part of the land in question was his. By the general sale agreement made with all 19 landowners and the President during the planning of the city, the government condemned and purchased only what was specified in the L'Enfant plan, while the remainder of an owner's tract stayed in his private hands to do with as he wished. Davidson insisted that he had sold to the government ground specified for the grand avenues, but since no avenues were being built, by the terms of the sale he owned the property as well as that abutting it. Stately private residences were projected to frame the triple avenues, as with palaces in Europe, and money was to be made from selling prime lots. And avenues or not, the government could claim only the rights of way of the streets themselves. Because of Davidson's complaints, L'Enfant's plan for the area before the President's House was stumped, nor would it be settled until after Davidson died in 1810. By that time the avenues were dim memory, and James Madison, the President, saw no need for them. Madison's successor, James Monroe, established Lafayette Square on the land and commenced its care and improvements as though it were part of the White House grounds, which it is. Any trace of what the land had been was about gone. Before Davidson's brief ownership, the land as part of Jamaica Plantation had belonged to generations of the Pierce family. Their old house and outbuildings, some in ruin, some still standing. People remembered a scattering of apple and pear trees that pierced the tangled woods and still bore fruit. After Davidson's death, and because he had failed to pay the Pierce family what he owed them, the property reverted to 2 Pierce brothers. The Pierce family graveyard had been excluded from the land sale to remain with the heirs, but was eventually included in the government's purchase. In about 1819, when the preliminary leveling of the site began, and the raising of the grade with fresh topsoil, a teenager, Christian Hines, who knew the Pierce brothers, alerted them. There being no tombstones to mark the graves, they asked the foreman to build a wooden box into which skulls, bones, hair combs, a wig with braided queue, shoes, and other human relics that turned up were deposited and hauled by ox cart to a cemetery on Capitol Hill. Thus the ghosts of the Pierces, their slaves and indentured servants, who had planted this land together since the 17th century, left forever. The square thrived through the 19th century as the best and most prominent place to live in Washington, and declined in the 20th century. It saw the building of houses along side streets, eventually named Madison Place on the east and Jackson Place on the west, and the main thoroughfare, H Street, at its northern head. The south end, across Pennsylvania Avenue, was commanded by the White House, resting on its ridge where George Washington
Sample complete. Ready to continue?